We have quite a few folks who've joined. Why don't we jump in? Deidre, let me just do a quick introduction for everybody who's on the line. I'm Jeff Richards. I'm one of the managing partners at GGV Capital. We are a global venture capital firm with offices in Beijing, Shanghai, Singapore, Menlo Park, and San Francisco. I mention that just because it's given us an interesting point of view throughout this whole COVID-19 crisis, and that we saw it happening in Asia before we saw it happening here in the US. Happy to share some of those thoughts. But we're really here today to talk about WFH, work from home, and how you handle managing a remote teams around the world, and best practices, particularly now that everybody has shifted into this mode. And for some folks, that's a new way of working. So let me turn it over. Jen, do you want to do a quick intro, and then we'll ask to do an intro?
Sure. I'm Jen Holmstrom. I lead talent for GGV, based out of San Francisco, and work with portfolio companies like WorkBoard on thinking about hiring people and developing people and retaining talent over time.
And you used to work at a little company called Facebook.
I did. Spent some time there.
Speaking of talent over time.
That's right. Yes.
That's great.
Deidre, how about you?
Yep, I'm Deidre Paknad. I'm CEO at WorkBoard and have actually led really large teams from home over the years, in particular my history at IBM. I will introduce a new acronym, which is LFH, not just WFH. So lead from home, not just work from home.
Yeah, good idea. Can you tell about WorkBoard? How big is the company? How many people around the world, locations, that kind of thing?
Yep. So we're roughly 130 people at the moment. The team is in India and then distributed across the US. We've been both India and US actually from the first week. So been a global company from the outset, and a team that worked over distance right from the outset. We have 8 offices around the US that are where we've clustered sales, services, and customer success team members closer to our customers.
And so you guys, I mean, obviously you've shifted into full-on work from home mode for the entire company over the last 2 weeks here, but you were doing this before, and you've been doing it throughout your career. So, and you posted a great post this week, or maybe it was last week, I've lost track, just talking about some things that you guys have done to make this a really productive work environment. And I will tell you that, for our firm, we have a global firm, but we have in Silicon Valley, we probably have 35 folks who, are generally in the office. And so as we shifted into work from home mode 2 weeks ago, it was a big change. I mean, just culturally, I'll speak from personal experience. I miss the interaction. I miss the smiles. I miss the random conversations, the serendipitous things that happen when you're in the office. And so I'd love to kind of get into some of that. Talk about the human side of this. Like, you've thought a lot about this, the psychology and the human element of this. And, what can you share with our audience about how you think about that, and maybe even sort of tie it into the current crisis and how you've approached communication and moving people into this mode over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah. One of the things that I thought of sort of really important for me as a leader quite early in this whole cycle was that I needed to proactively manage people's fear and isolation, right? And that was my first job, to manage that, and then my second job was to manage the business. And when I sort of think about that, and we have a super diverse organization, right, with people in both age spectrum and lots of cultural and ethnic diversity. And so for our young people who share a house, and all their housemates are all work from home, they're in their bedroom all day with nothing but a monitor. That's pretty isolating. It's pretty awkward. Yeah. So if you're hunched over the bed and that's all you're doing all day, like, okay, we got to think hard about that. They don't have a comfortable office at home like you and I can afford to do in the home we bought. They're earlier in their career. And then, as you pointed out, there's a bunch of people who are on our team and connected to customers every single day in person. And so their genetic wiring is high engagement all the time. And now they're isolated. And that's just psychologically hard. Like, what makes work awesome for them isn't there. And then anybody who's was on social media before this thing started, oh my gosh, those people are being drowned by fear and plummeting markets and crisis. That's all you hear. And even if you're not on social media, your mom and your grandma and your aunts are selling you those crazy things that arise on the internet when stuff goes wrong, right? That really, like, we're all doomed. And so that, all that noise and discomfort and disconnect, that's like real ever present for every one of our team members right now. And it's happening at a time where things we would normally do to blow off stress and to stay centered, like go outside, be with people, connect with our families, connect with our customers, those avenues of relief aren't available to us. And so I tried to jump into that breach and say, all right, well, how do I offset, supplement, replace, like find alternate ways to connect as humans, to nourish people through, and to what I think of sort of buoying the culture and the connection by being super aware of what's frayed and decayed in this situation for our team members.
And so are you doing that on a one-on-one basis? Are you having your executive team folks do more? How are you doing that? Because you can't personally call all 200 people every day.
No. Actually, we have a listed 10 things. And I don't know, Bailey, if you want to share those, but we put these 10 things into play, and then we went and shared it with our customers who are much bigger than we are. So Comcast, Cisco, IBM, Microsoft, Samsung, and they're adopting some of these 10 things as well. But among those 10 things are a set of, that are really just sort of organized around what I think of as that culture connection. So the first is just, we're a super chat oriented company, with both with our customers and with each other. But first message was, if it's more than 3 lines, make it a video call instead of keep on texting or chatting with each other. Like, shift to quickly. Video is the means we're going to have a conversation. They can be short and sweet, but we're going to be able to see each other. So bias quickly and bias now to that. We moved to weekly all hands. We made those all hands as funny as we could be. So best outfit. Our people ops person she just crushed this. Like, first meeting, she comes with a spa background on her Zoom, full face mask, a robe, and her hair in a wrap. And she's lounging in the spa setting. Second week, she comes with she's just like, her creativity is blowing our minds, but ski helmet, goggles up, ski sweater, has put makeup on to do the goggle tan. And it's like goggle tan visible through Zoom, right? And the ski slope in the background. It's like, and that full.
Did we lose Deidre? Are you guys still there?
I think we lost Deidre for a sec here.
We got the frozen Zoom. Hold on one sec.
Yep.
Okay.
You're back.
Back.
I think the other thing that, and lots of companies experiencing this, where you're using a Zoom channel where people are sharing photos of their home office, and obviously kids welcome in our con calls. So it's suddenly more intimate, much more intimate, which I think is fabulous for the human connections. I do a walking Ask Me Anything call once a week, and you've got to be walking on this call, which is just settling everybody down and, of course, getting us all off our butts, where we're spending a lot more time than we used to. That walking AMA is one of the most adopted things in our among our much larger customers as well. People have more questions, right? And they want to know what you as a leader are really thinking. What do you think is going to happen? What does that mean for us? What are you hearing from other leaders? And so the walking AMA just opens that up and lets people bring it forward, but also sort of anchors people in a different way, just breathing and moving. And then I do a daily dose every morning. I just do somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes of a recording, and I drop it into a Keep Me Posted internal communications channel, which is what you'd hear from me if I was meeting you at the coffee machine, except the upside is this ritual actually now reaches everybody, not just the people who are near my coffee machine. And that's a dose of fearlessness, and it's a dose of forward movement, right? And there's facts, and here's the situation in it, but it's really meant to keep people connected upward as opposed to sinking downward, which It's pretty easy to do if you're listening to the outside in. And then we swapped out our weekly lunches with flowers, which are literally $7. $7. And we're all sitting in our home offices, and for some people on my team right now, it's snowing. You can't go outside. The cabin fever it's high. And so we just drop in those weekly flowers literally. And it's a tiny little thing, turns out to be a huge impact. Our chief people officer is doing a weekly huddle with managers. A lot of mine are really young and rising managers. It's their first crisis, and we want to help them be good listeners and make sure they have some ventilation room, because of course when you're listening, you're onboarding other people's fears. We want to make sure we're taking good care of them. We used the last 3 weeks to build and supply a set of symptom relief kits that are Robitussin, Kleenex, lemons, honey, tea, Dayquil, NyQuil, Kleenex, couple cans of old-fashioned chicken noodle soup, some handwritten notes, lots of love, and those are on stock. And we've used 5 of them for team members who've gotten sick. We established a food delivery service for people who have to isolate. We put that in place 2 weeks ago. And then lastly, a stipend to upgrade, whether it's bandwidth or your chair or your monitor, microphone, whatever it is, so that people can be as productive as possible, and combined with we can nourish them as much as possible through hard times.
Hey, Deidre, so one of the questions that popped up, somebody asked, is how do you get more engagement? I know, like, one of the things that was painful to me, I'm a power user of Slack, but every once in a while I'll post a bunch of crickets on there because I'm the only one posting. And it's like, it'd be like the same 6 people, like, da, 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 da. How do you get the broader team engaged, whether it's an all hands or any of these things? Because it's just not in some people's DNA to be super engaged on these things.
This combination of things affected people in ways that they didn't anticipate. And so I like crazy engagement. And maybe it's because they need it more. Maybe it's because it's this combination of me out and also them in. But I'm blown away.
You're seeing it bring people in. I guess maybe specifically one of the questions was, how do you get people to speak up?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, they might call in on an audience, but how do you get people to actually speak up and feel comfortable in that? Because sometimes we have people who they don't want to speak up in person. Now they're sitting in there with the dog in the back of the video, and now they really don't want to speak up. So how are you kind of bringing people out into the?
Yeah, I think it's. I do think if you are consistently kind and generous, you actually end up inspiring people to have their first word.
We lost you there. Deidre?
AMAs.
Still be back here. Yeah, there you go.
We're going to have to get you, Deidre. I'm only pay for an upgraded internet line into your house because we got to get you a better bandwidth connection.
If I told you my internet story, it would shock you.
Deidre, just a quick question. You mentioned that your chief people officer is holding huddles for managers, and can only imagine during this time that as a first-time manager, this is a pretty daunting scenario, and it's a pretty difficult thing to manage through. Yeah. What's coming out in those huddles? What are first-time managers thinking about, talking about, and what's helping as a way forward?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on. So for some of them, it's the first time that they have a employee where there's sort of real emotional challenges, right? And so one of the things Stu, our chief people officer, is helping coach managers through is like how to respond in that situation. Is really just talking them through that. A lot of them are for the first time experiencing team members who are who feel like, they have a flu or they have some symptoms, and they're suddenly very anxious about how can I get testing, and what does this mean, right? And how to be a steady leader, and what's the role even of being a leader and a manager in a situation where you have a team member that feels sick. And those are probably the largest. Most of our first line managers right now are managing their own fear, managing the anxiety and fear of their team members, and managing kind of emotional fluctuations on their team members. And how do we do that in a way that's both compassionate, but also forward moving? This is where most of, I think, his energy and his conversations are with the first level managers.
And when some of the, when anybody is symptomatic, as I think probably every, if not most companies will face over the coming days and weeks, what are some of the protocols that you have in place to respond?
Yep. So as I said, we went to work from home 3 weeks ago. In that first week, we did a team roster of households with people at risk, where we quickly built a map of what the first and second degree.
Just give her a second here.
Maybe I'll get Deidre the Verizon MiFi.
Kits and the meal kits.
We lost you there for a minute, Deidre.
All right. So built a network and a map of who might be at risk and who might need our help. Built that early so we could act on it when something did happen. Building the stock of symptom relief kits was a really smart idea. It's hard to get your hands on Robitussin right now.
Right.
And you can't leave your house.
Right.
So it's great when this thing shows up on your doorstep. And of course we had to build them early because it's not so easy to do them now either. And so that was helpful. But when somebody raises their hand, our chief people officer then, that they're symptomatic, our chief people officer then kicks off the kits, the meal service, and does kind of an every 2 hour check-in with them. We do a nightly manager or executive team huddle every night, health status of our employees, in the ones who are sick, where they are, what's happening next, and the same thing for their 1 degree family, so that we can be what I think of as activate the safety net as best as we can. And then we've got a safety net on the safety net. Right?
Yeah, that's smart. Very, very proactive. That's great.
Deidre, what are you, can you just talk a little about, okay, so you mentioned you're doing a nightly call with managers. What has anything changed about the cadence of your business? How are you doing like Monday leadership team meetings? What are managers below you doing with those meetings? Like, has anything changed, or is it just take the model that worked in the office and move it remote? Looks like she's frozen. She's probably got a phenomenal answer right now.
That's right.
We're gonna have to make one of our requirements for webinars. We do a little internet test beforehand.
Right. Increasing demands on the system here.
Like, poof, want it to work. Oh, now she's gone. She's gonna pop back in. Jen, let me tap your brain then for a minute. You've been talking to, I know you just hosted a call for talent managers last Friday. You've been talking to the heads of people for all these companies. What's your sense of where people are in terms of rolling out their work from home programs? I mean, the stuff that Deidre's doing around health, I think is pretty advanced, but where are folks, and maybe can you provide a little bit of guidance on where folks should be? Yeah. And then I think maybe like what's ahead? We have probably, I don't know whether it's 3 weeks, 5 weeks. We don't know how long this is going to go on. And so what are you hearing talent managers and heads of people talk about right now?
It's so true. I think, first of all, a big shout out to all the people leaders out there who are really working round the clock to help companies address this and to reach out and really show compassion to their employees. First, I would say 3 things. One, communication is so critically important. I think a lot of heads of people are putting communication protocols in place, like Deidre was describing, with much more of a frequency than you would in the absence of spontaneous meetings in an environment, where you can see each other and interact. Increasingly, the cadence of communication protocols is important. So as Deidre mentioned, I think a lot of companies are, at least if they don't have an executive meeting every day, they're having a COVID task force meeting every day. That's one thing. They're bringing employees together in all hands forums much, much more frequently than they did. And they are also encouraging the use of communication channels like Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is. There's a lot more frequency of communication in different forums. So that's one thing. Two, putting protocols in place to just check on the safety and the health of employees is another thing where there's been a lot of focus. Different companies are doing it differently, but I think getting a general kind of map and connection point around who's where, and making sure that if there are health concerns that they can be extremely responsive is the second thing. And the third, and then at a more tactical kind of operational level, just for running the business, performance has been a topic of conversation that we had in our People Leader Forum this morning around. So there's a lot of questioning of what do we do with performance management? Do we keep going with our usual performance cycles? Do we pause on that? And several companies mentioning that they are separating compensation cycles from performance. So if they're midway through a performance cycle, they're maintaining that momentum, just moving it online, but they are actually deferring. In many cases, they were deferring compensation decisions to see what all shakes out here.
And what are you seeing people do? I just interviewed a candidate for one of our companies on video, and I said, well, what's the next step? And she said, we're trying to figure that out, because normally you would meet the team in person, but what are people doing with candidates that are in the pipeline and not being able to meet them physically in person, number one, and number two, not really knowing what the timeline is for when that might change?
It's a great question. So there are all kinds of different resources are popping up out there to help answer just this question. But really, the companies are making a lot of decisions via remotely in terms of hiring. And then, of course, companies are also slowing hiring down. So that is a natural response to this for some certain companies, and others they're maintaining pace. So it's kind of a one fits one, but I think where in the absence of being able to meet candidates in person and have that kind of human interaction, people are having to defer to forums like this and online video forums. But decisions are still being made. I'm still seeing offers go out, and candidates take jobs, and being willing to move forward. Is that your assistant that just walked by? Yeah.
That's my 9-year-old son, just cruised by in his bathrobe, Friday at 1:30.
That's right. Naturally.
So you're trying to keep things in motion. Having said that, where would you say is the general tenor on hiring? I'm hearing a lot of folks say that they're, pausing things for now, trying to see where the market is, and maybe hoping they'll have better clarity on the outlook for the rest of the year, maybe in 30 days.
Yeah, we're seeing that again. Totally depends on the company. We talked to some this morning who are actively trying to hire, maybe more the exception than the rule. But an example, PlushCare which is online telemedicine, if you will. They can't hire enough doctors right now, and some of the e-commerce companies that we're lucky to have in the portfolio are looking for folks for hourly workers to join them. So it's really a little bit all over the place right now for some of the B2B SaaS companies where it's a little bit more of an uncertain economic environment. They may be pausing hiring, or they may be just given the fact that kind of given the economic landscape that we're looking towards, this is going to be a time of unrest, I think, in the talent market overall, where in some cases companies will have to lay people off, and for others, they'll be able to hire talent that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. So there's a moment there that's potentially an opportunity for certain companies, but others are going to have to pause.
Okay. Oh, I think we might have Deidre back on the phone. This is like one of the shows where they have some call in and they have a bad line, disconnect them.
That's right.
Well, if she does jump back in, we'll roll her in. Let me see if we have any questions from folks. We've got a couple that I've already thrown in, but any questions for Jen or for Deidre? She's back.
All right.
Miracles.
Deidre, anything we didn't cover that we should have?
I think the only thing I would chime in, and I was able to hear the hiring conversation, but one of the things I think important for leaders right now in particular is you need to scale your impact and your effectiveness and make sure that your own energy isn't sapped and drained. Right. And that's, I think, being on Zoom all day isn't it. And I think that, so how do you scale your efficiency as a leader and scale your touch and reach? I think really thinking through that carefully and thoughtfully is important.
So important. I remember when I was running one of my companies and I came in, I think maybe my girlfriend had broken up with me or something, and I came in a couple days in a row in not a great mood. And one of our execs said to me, "Hey, dude, you don't get to have an off day. You're the CEO. You got to be on, and we're queuing off of you." And so it is such a hard thing when you're balancing what you're reading in the news. You're scared. You don't really know what's coming down the pipeline. You've got kids at home, and then you're worried about your company, financing, runway, your board, all these other things. But you've got to be on. How are you doing that? Because that's not easy.
In some ways, I have the good fortune of having been a CEO in 2000, in 2001, in 2008, in 2009. And so I do know that what goes down comes up and vice versa. That's helpful. I think, in so many ways, I'm actually quite mobilized and quite motivated to be a leader at a time when people need a leader. And I have a big appetite for that. So that's helpful, right? I think working from home gives us all a lot more opportunity to commit to and actually do the level of exercise. And for me, it's yoga every morning that I always want to do, but always gets blown off when I traveled. Okay, now it doesn't have to get blown off. Perfect timing. I can actually anchor my day in that. And then really upping the amount of time I spend being grateful, because there's nothing more nourishing than that. And so if I can be helpful and grateful every day, and that's my message to the team as well, that builds resilience. And I think we see that actually broadly in the universe right now. We see a lot more people being kind and compassionate and being grateful. And maybe that's that and cleaner air are the big byproducts, the positive byproducts of the experience for all of us.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And
Deidre,
as
go ahead, Jen, sorry.
Oh, so as Stu, your chief people officer, often says, every moment for a leader, especially now, is an onstage moment. So the tone that you set is so critically important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we have any questions, folks? You can type them in, or Bailey, do you know if we've got anything from our folks that have joined? I'm trying to think of other things that I've heard from. I think I've done 20 different portfolio meetings and calls over the last 10 days. The other thing that I would say, one tip I heard from a founder this week was recognizing that you're an international company or you're a global company, being conscious of time zones for meetings, being conscious of cultural norms, and also that every country is dealing with this issue in a different way. So if you have teams in India or elsewhere, parts of Europe, every part of the world is dealing with this issue, but they're all dealing with it in a different way. And so part of what they've done is try to listen and not just assume that everybody's sort of reading the tea leaves on what's going on in America and how we're dealing with this, but also try to get a handle on, what may be specific to locales around the world. One suggestion here, one of the folks typed in, said, not a question, but what has been working well for my company: virtual happy hours, virtual lunch hours, live yoga classes each Monday. And it strikes me that if we're going to be doing this for a while, those things are going to become the norm. right? So they look fun the first week, but like you gotta make them the norm. Another question, Deidre, do you think it will change the duration of the planning cycle from quarterly to a shorter forecast of specific goals?
Yeah, for sure. I this morning actually was with the CEO and leadership team of Juniper Networks doing their OKR reset for the next quarter, and I've spent a lot of time with Comcast, not calling the 800 number, but actually helping them with their OKRs as well. And the a couple things I see. So this, and Bailey, I had a couple tips around this too, but some of the shifts I see is we used to think about how do we run the business and grow the business. And now we need to think about holding in our, as leaders, holding in our minds, both how do we run the business and how do we respond? And not just respond. We got to run the business too. And that run and respond in parallel is what I'm seeing is people setting respond objectives for a 45-day window, but continuing to drive some of their key objectives just for the longer horizon, right? So adjusting what they understand about, for example, their sales and bookings numbers to a shorter horizon, putting some triage objectives in place for a shorter horizon, but continuing to drive innovation, people, culture, and operational excellence objectives as if nothing had changed. And so there's those stay on the old cycle, the response objectives shortening to a 45-day window. I think that's important for teams that are thinking maybe we don't do OKRs this quarter. Don't. Pause that thought. It's more important than ever that you give the signal to the team what to focus on, what matters, how you're defining success right now. Provide direction. Don't abdicate that because you don't have perfect vision. They still want your best guess. Give it to them. And then be as transparent as you possibly can, because trust ends up being so crucial in a work from home world. And I led a work from home business at IBM from 2010 to 2014. 100% of my team was work from home. 200,000 of 400,000 IBMers had no office or desk anywhere at IBM. And the things that made that work were we had a lot of transparency. You had to have a lot of trust in the relationship, which means you needed a lot of data to have trust and fact base. And in order for teams to be efficient, they had to be able to, from their house, understand how other people were progressing. And that trust and transparency will be really crucial ingredients, I think, for teams to be effective beyond, hey, we had great fun at the virtual happy hour. Like, that's great, and we got to run the business. And so running the business, I think, means set clear direction, over communicate it, and work transparently, not by using meetings as your medium for transparency, or literally you will burn out in meeting hell just if that's the mechanism you use to find out where you are now. For managers and team members in particular, you don't want every conversation you have 3 weeks from now when Zumba is no longer interesting. You don't want every conversation to be, well, where are you on that? And where are you on that? And where are you on that? Like, that will start to be actually pretty corrosive to the relationship team members have with each other and they have with their manager.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole nother session just on how are folks going to deal with performance management over the next 90 days. I mean, you know, we've been sort of coaching our teams that on the enterprise side in particular, you know, we may see bookings drop as much as 80% in Q2. How do you handle that? I mean, normally it's like a disaster from a management standpoint with your reps, but if that's the expectation going in, how do you celebrate success, celebrate wins? You know, kind of, I don't know if you have any tips there, but I'm sensing that, you know, as everybody sort of rejiggers their plan for the year, it's going to be hard to roll that out throughout the organization and celebrate success when everybody feels like they're failing against the original objectives.
I think that's the point of doing actually quarterly OKRs. It actually allows you to say, okay, what's true now? And how are we defining success now, given what's true today in our world, internally and externally? And a good OKR motion just bakes that in, right? And so if we reset objectives and our key results for Q2, or even for half of Q2, reflective of what we know to be true today, we're giving clearer signals to people in the organization on what to focus on, what matters now, and so on. And one of those signals can be, hey, we know this quarter is going to be bumpy. We absorb it, we can accept it, etc. And here's where I want you to focus. And so what we're doing, and what I see a lot of our customers doing, is we know it's going to be bumping, double down on enabling your existing customers, double down on being helpful to the customers you have. That you can control. You got all the power in the universe. All the people in your company can drive higher value to the customers you have right now, channel the energy there. It may not be that you're taking on new customers at the same rate you expected, doesn't mean you're not all driving value. And so I think that may be part of the shift in people's Q2 OKRs, is more emphasis on customer experience and customer enablement and helping our customers realize value while you absorb the dip in net new customer adds.
And Deidre, just to build on that, it's a great time, as you've done with some of the content from here today, is helping your customers navigate this particular crisis. So they're thinking differently about ways in which to help customers, I'm sure.
Yeah, in our case, I've had 3 customers today say how, and of course it is the real kick for me, but to say how grateful they are that they already have the capacity to get everybody realigned on a new reality quickly. And some, like a Comcast, as an example, that they also have the capability now to get people realigned on a return. So not only do we need to get realigned on this dip, we're going to want to be able to mobilize really quickly when things change as well. And so for us, what we do for customers is well aligned with what it is they need to do now. So how do we get everybody on the same page, even when everybody's in a different house, right? And we make that pretty easy for our customers.
Okay, let's see. Any other questions? I want to be conscious of time. We've gone 40 minutes. Jen, anything we didn't cover that we should have, or Deidre?
Jeff, you touched on it a little bit. The only thing that I would say is to any advice, Deidre, to folks in different parts of the world. When it's complicated, given we work with a lot of companies in China, and they are coming back to work full time, which in and of itself has its own challenges returning from a scenario like this. But anything that you've seen that you would want to share with everybody, best practices around that?
I don't know if I have best practices on in particular the opposite sort of ends of the cycle that we find between China and the US. Our India team is also work from home. It's a fairly large team. Reliance Industries is a very large company, customer of ours. They're all also work from home in India. They're a couple weeks behind in terms of like the decision to do that. And so there's an opportunity to share and connect and loop them in ways that we wouldn't have in the past. I think the thing we're most mindful of is we have a really culturally diverse set of people. So we have team members whose families are in Iran, whose families are in Italy, whose families are in China. And so we're trying to be really mindful of the what they're hearing, which is very different than if you don't have families in those troubled spots, and what their anxiety load is around that. And I would say that the anxiety load is really different for people whose families are in China and in Italy and Iran. Their anxiety level is just phenomenally high as they hear what's coming in, what's being said in those countries versus kind of what's being said, particularly kind of the middle part of the US, where it's not quite as significant or severe as it is in California and New York. I think it soon will be, but the noise is higher for those team members, and we're trying to be, if you will, extra connected to them to balance that back out and give them space to work through it.
So just being really conscious of where everybody's personal anxiety may come from.
Yeah, their second degree relationships right now matter. Yeah,
it's such a good point. So being aware of the employee's circle, kind of another degree beyond the employee themselves.
Yep. Whole person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say just one other thing that we learned from our experience in China over the last 90 days, you know, and they're sort of now coming out of this crisis in China. The number of cases is down to the teens per day. Unbelievable opportunity for companies to double down on their current customers and innovate on product. When you sort of take the constraint of like, we have to go sell a ton of customers this quarter, and you assume that's not going to happen, and you focus on your existing customers and some of your products, it's pretty powerful. So hopefully we can all double down on some of those things and have a productive, whether it's 3 months, 6 months. You know, if we do have some impact to sales, we can still get a ton of productivity out of it. And you know, I believe, and we believe, we're going to see some leaders really emerge from this time period.
Yep. Epic opportunity for leadership on every level.
Well, let's wrap. Let's be conscious of time. Everybody, thank you for joining. We hope you have a great Friday and hope you learned a little bit. Deidre, thank you for sharing.
Thank you,
And
Deidre.
Where else can people find some of your resources, Deidre?
There's definitely a set of blog posts around this on workboard.com, insights, including those 10 tips that you're welcome to have. And we are publishing a Manager's Monday morning blog post with incremental tips as you move through the experience. Hopefully those will be of interest and value as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.